I went on a $40 0 K family cruise without me. They thought I'd be too old to notice. I called the bank from the airport and froze every one of their cards before the ship left port. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and butter. I had been simmering the stew for hours, just the way they liked it, rich, thick, with chunks of tender beef and potatoes that melted on the tongue. The dining table was already set, silverware polished, napkins folded into little swans, just like I used to do when their father was still alive. They came in with the same noise as always, laughing, phones buzzing, shoes tracking in beach sand. "We should get to the port early," my son said, placing a glossy cruise itinerary on the table like a trophy. They upgraded us to the luxury deck. It comes with private butlers and a seafood bar. My hands trembled just slightly as I ladled stew into the bowls. I did not want to intrude. I never do. But something about the way they avoided looking at me, even as I stood right there, apron still on, spoon in hand, made the silence feel sharp. So I asked carefully, "Do you need me to pack anything for the trip?" It was my daughter-in-law who answered first. She did not even lift her eyes from her phone. "Mom, the ship does not offer fall risk insurance. You know what that means, right? We cannot afford for someone to take a tumble on a moving deck." Then came the laughter. Not warm laughter, not the kind that makes your eyes crease. This was the dry kind, the kind that sounds like shoes scraping tile. My grandson, spoon already halfway to his mouth, smirked. "She's just a roach with a penchant. She survives everything but adds nothing." That word, roach, it hit me like a slap made of smoke. I could not even feel the bowl slipping from my hand. It shattered on the floor with a sharp crack. Stew sprayed across the linoleum. My feet stood still in the middle of it, shoes soaked in beef broth. No one moved to help me. "Great," said my daughter-in-law, annoyed, standing finally. "Now I have to mop. We do not want the house smelling like old people's soup before we leave." I bent down slowly, too slowly because my hip locked halfway. The sharp edge of porcelain bit into the heel of my palm. A red bead formed, swelled, then slid down my wrist. I stood up and said nothing. My son did not look up. They resumed dinner as if nothing had happened. My bowl was not replaced. No one offered me a plate. I washed dishes alone while their laughter filled the hall. They talked about excursions in Cozumel and lobster buffets and whether to pack the silk dress or the linen one. From the sink I could hear my grandson snort. Imagine Grandma in a swimsuit. The cruise would have to detour. I turned the faucet harder. Hot water burned my hands. I welcomed the pain. When I finished, I dried my hands on a rag that smelled faintly of bleach. The towel rack wobbled. They had never fixed it, despite promising to. I climbed the stairs, my knees clicking with each step. In the hallway, I paused outside the guest room, my room, technically, though they called it the overflow space. I heard them open a bottle of wine. A toast was made. "To new beginnings," said my son. "To no more dead weight." I closed the door behind me without a sound. The room was small, colder than the rest of the house. They kept the vent half shut, said it saved energy. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, the one with the sunken middle and the faded quilt I had stitched myself in 1972. The light flickered. It had been doing that for months. My requests to replace the bulb were met with sighs. I looked at my hand. The cut was deeper than I thought. I went to the bathroom and found no bandages. Only a half-used roll of toilet paper and an expired bottle of aspirin. Back in my room, I opened the nightstand drawer. There was a box there, a heavy one. Inside, bank statements, deed copies, old letters, and the one thing they seemed to have forgotten, the house was still in my name. They had never transferred it, assuming I would die soon or forget. They were wrong on both counts. I sat still for a long while, listening. Downstairs they played music, something poppy, something with bass, the kind I never liked. They were packing now. I could hear the zippers. "Don't forget sunscreen," said my daughter-in-law. "And Grandma's pills," my grandson joked. "Oh, wait, she is not coming." The laughter again. I took a deep breath. No tears, no anger, just breath. I opened my closet, pulled out the small black suitcase I had not touched since the funeral, folded one dress, one cardigan, the good shoes, my documents. The rest I would not need. I left the suitcase by the door, sat on the bed, folded my hands. Tomorrow, I would start making calls, and by the time their ship left port, they would remember that even roaches have claws. There was a time when my name meant something, when students stayed after lectures just to hear a little more, to ask if Emily Dickinson had really meant to be that lonely, or if Hemingway ever cried. I was Professor Marie Whitman back then, Department of English, tenured before I turned 40. I taught through 3 deans, 4 presidents, and 30 graduating classes. But none of that mattered once I stepped into this house. In here, I am Mom. Or worse, her. My grandson used to be proud of me. When he was little, he'd tell his teachers his grandma wrote books and spoke French. He even took one of my old lectures, printed and highlighted, and presented it as his own paper in 9th grade. I did not scold him for that. I just smiled and helped him pronounce existentialism without tripping. But everything changed the year he applied to college. He sat me down one evening with a desperate look. Ivy League or nothing, he said. Brown or Columbia. Anything else would be a failure. He needed a letter of recommendation from a respected academic, and I was it. I was flattered, of course, until I read the draft he wanted me to sign. It was full of lies. He claimed to have published literary critiques, led a poetry group for veterans, volunteered at a center for at-risk youth. None of it was true. I told him gently, "Sweetheart, I can write you a letter, a good one, based on what you've actually done," he snapped. "That's not good enough. I'm competing with kids who are building satellites and saving orphans. No one cares if I was on the debate team," I said. "Then, be honest. Let your words matter." He called me selfish, a dinosaur. He told his mother that I had sabotaged his future. From that night forward, I was no longer Grandma the scholar. I was Grandma the saboteur. My daughter-in-law began to change how she looked at me. Less respect, more eye rolls. One afternoon, she walked in while I was reading on the porch and snapped a photo without asking. Later, I saw the image posted on her social media with the caption, "This woman thinks Shakespeare invented democracy. Lol." Worse, she started screenshotting my Facebook posts and sending them to her group chat. I know because I overheard her cackling in the kitchen. "Lehon? Balaichia fake news Roy?" I never even posted about politics. Only poems, quotes, old photos of books I loved. But to them, everything I said was outdated, irrelevant, embarrassing. I began to notice little things disappearing. My reading glasses, the address book I kept by the phone. Contacts vanished from my phone. Susan, my dearest friend from college, who sent me a card every Christmas for 30 years, stopped answering my calls. I tried to call her twice, then 3 times. Each time, a confused voice would answer, "You have reached Pete's Pizza. How can I help you?" At first I thought it was a wrong number. Then I looked closer. Her contact name was correct, but the number was different. I asked my grandson if he had touched my phone. He shrugged. "Maybe you saved it wrong. Happens at your age," I asked again. My daughter-in-law chimed in. "She's been calling a pizza shop all week. We should probably have her checked out." They both laughed. Later, during dinner with some of their friends, they played the voicemail I had accidentally left on that pizza line. It was me, confused, asking Susan if she still remembered the pink scarf I crocheted her in '81. The room howled with laughter. "Is that her? That's so sad, it's funny." I swear my grandma did the same thing. She asked the mailman to turn off the TV. Old age is tragic, but hilarious. They thought they were being discreet, whispering behind napkins, but I heard every word, and I smiled politely, excused myself, and went upstairs to my room, the overflow space, as they called it. There I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I held it like a relic. It no longer connected me to the world. It was now a tool of humiliation. That night I cried quietly, not for the pizza incident, not for the laughter, but for the slow erasure of who I had been. It is one thing to be forgotten. It is another to be rewritten as a joke. The next morning I tried calling Susan again, using my old paper Rolodex. This time she answered. "Marie?" she gasped. "Where have you been? I thought you had passed away. Your number changed. Your Facebook was deleted." "I never deleted anything," I whispered. "I sent flowers to the old address. They came back marked, 'No longer at residence.'" That was when it clicked. They had rerouted everything. my mail, my number, my accounts. They made me a ghost in my own life. I started checking everything. My credit score had been accessed 6 times in 2 months. Subscriptions were opened in my name. The Wi-Fi was no longer registered to me. Even the family Netflix account had my profile listed as basic grandma. At dinner that evening, I said nothing. I passed the bread. I smiled. I even complimented the salad, though it was soggy. But in my heart, something clicked into place. A quiet fury, a resolve. They thought I was fading. But I was not disappearing. I was documenting. The next week, I borrowed a notebook from the dollar store. I began writing down everything. The things they said, the charges I never made, the gifts they claimed I gave, but never did. I found the device manual for my hearing aid. It had a recording function. I began recording. I started with a morning conversation. My daughter-in-law, if she dies before the cruise, can we get a refund? My grandson, she's like mold. You cannot kill her. She just grows quieter. My son, as long as she keeps signing the checks, I do not care what she hears. Each sentence inked into my notebook like bricks in a wall. I was building something. A case, a mirror, a weapon. At night, I practiced smiling in the mirror. Not fake, not forced, just calm. The kind of smile that does not forgive, but waits. My cat, Ginger, had been gone for 2 weeks now. They said she ran away. I found her collar in the trash. They denied it. Are you sure that's not from a stray? My daughter-in-law said, sipping tea from the mug I gave her last Mother's Day. She never really liked cats anyway, my grandson added. I stared at the empty cushion beside my bed. Ginger used to sleep there. She was soft, warm, a heartbeat beside mine. I opened the drawer next to me. Inside were the documents they forgot to steal. Title deed, bank account access, a notarized power of attorney unsigned. A letter from the university offering me a lifetime lecture series. I had declined it, thought it was time to rest. Not yet, I thought. Not until the stage was mine again. Not until they knew what it felt like to be rewritten, betrayed, mocked. Not until they saw what a roach with a penchant could do when she remembers every word, every lie, every laugh. And never forget, I did not ask for the kitten. That much is important to remember. It was not something I hinted at, or requested, or even hoped for. It was given to me, packaged like a peace offering on my 75th birthday, tucked in a woven basket with a ribbon and a card that said, "To the best grandma ever." I should have known better. Gifts in this house often come with barbed wire wrapped in tulle. "She's yours," my grandson had said, holding out the basket. The kitten was barely 8 weeks old, with ears too big for her face and fur the color of cinnamon. She blinked up at me with amber eyes, unsure but trusting. "You should name her," he added, as if this were a new beginning. "Ginger," I whispered, reaching in. "She looks like gingerbread." The room was full of laughter and cake and chatter, the kind of noise that can almost fool you into thinking you are wanted. That night, Ginger slept on my chest, her tiny heartbeat ticking against mine like a second hand on an old clock. I had not felt that kind of warmth in years, not since my husband passed, not since the house was still mine, and not just the place they let me exist in. For 7 days, she became my companion. She would curl into the crook of my arm when I read. She followed me into the kitchen when I boiled tea. She greeted me at the door of my room each morning like I was the center of her world. It was a small bond, but it held more honesty than anything else I had left. And then, on the 8th morning, she was gone. No paw prints, no food eaten, no trace of her warm little body on the blanket, just a silence that felt wrong. Still, I searched the hallway first, then the living room. I called her name gently, then louder. I checked under beds, behind curtains, even inside the pantry. Nothing. My daughter-in-law passed by, with a cup of coffee in hand, barely glancing up from her phone. "Looking for something? Ginger, I cannot find her," she sighed theatrically. "Oh, that cat? She's probably hiding, like you do when we have guests." I waited all day. I left food out, I shook the treat bag, I even went outside and whistled, though she had never been out. By evening, I asked again. My grandson looked up from his game controller. Maybe she ran away. Some animals can sense weird energy. I blinked. "What kind of energy?" He shrugged. "Like Old people vibes or bad luck? Animals are smart like that, my daughter-in-law laughed. I read somewhere, cats avoid rooms with dying plants and bad feng shui. No offense, Mom. No offense, as if dressing cruelty in a horoscope made it less sharp. I returned to my room. Her bed was gone. The little woven basket, the toys, the food dish, all of it had vanished. I opened the closet. Empty. No scratching post, no litter box, no sign she had ever existed. I opened the trash bin in the garage. There, half buried under empty soda cans and a torn grocery bag, was the pink fleece blanket she used to sleep on, the one I had stitched her name into with trembling hands. I took it out, dusted it off. It still smelled faintly of her, that soft, milky kitten smell. I pressed it to my face and sat down, right there on the cement floor. I did not cry. I just sat as the cold crept through my knees and into my bones. They had taken her from me, without a word, without hesitation. Later that night, when I confronted them, carefully, gently, my daughter-in-law said, "You know, Mom, some animals just are not meant for this environment. Ginger was too sensitive." My son said nothing, just scrolled through his emails, and my grandson muttered, "She was annoying anyway," scratched my sneakers. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. I said, "Thank you for thinking of me." I said maybe it was for the best. I said I would be more careful next time. I became an accomplice in my own erasure. That is what happens when you are old. You learn to nod while they write you out of your own life. They noticed I was quieter after that, less present, but they misread it. They thought it was sadness, it was clarity. I began to list the things they had taken from me, not all at once, but little by little, like moths eating through silk. The garden, once mine, now paved over for a fire pit and 2 plastic Adirondack chairs. My kitchen, reorganized, my cast iron pans replaced with non-stick garbage that peels at the attic. My books, boxed and stored in the attic because the shelf looked cluttered. My radio, gone. My chair, replaced. My photos, taken down to make room for new memories. My calendar, crossed out, rewritten, replaced by their appointments. Even my name. They no longer called me Marie. I was Mom, or her, or Grandma, said with a groan, like it tasted bad. Piece by piece I vanished. I became an echo in the house I once built, and every time I tried to push back, even gently, I was met with the same exhausted sighs. "Mom, don't start. God, you're being dramatic again. We're trying to make things easier for you. Why do you resist?" Resist? I had not resisted a thing in years. But now, the blanket in my lap reminded me what resistance looked like. It looked like remembering. I began to write again. Just a little each night, not poems, not essays, but lists. Lists of what they had said, what they had taken, what they had done when they thought I was too tired to notice. I kept the notebook under my mattress. One evening, I overheard my grandson laughing in the hallway. I told my friend Grandma's not even a person anymore. She's just an artifact with a pulse. In the morning, I went to the bank. I said I needed a copy of my latest statements. The teller, a kind young man with braces, asked if I was okay. I told him, "I am just doing a little housekeeping." He smiled. I went to the pharmacy next. I filled my own prescriptions and asked for a printout of every medication I had ever taken. The pharmacist hesitated. "Is someone else managing your care?" "No," I said clearly. "They only think they are." Back home, I cooked dinner that night. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed carrots, their favorite. They were surprised. I was warm, polite, present. They took pictures. My daughter-in-law posted one of the table, blessed to have a strong matriarch at the head of the table. I was not in the frame. I never was. Later, after the dishes were done, I opened my drawer and placed Ginger's blanket inside. Folded perfectly. That night, I slept with the window open, and I dreamed of a cat that did not run away. She was taken, and I was done pretending I could not see it. Thanksgiving came with its usual empty rituals. I had long stopped expecting warmth from the holiday, only performance, the smell of cinnamon candles, the echo of clinking glasses, the false comfort of a home that had forgotten how to hold me. This year, they planned a 4 generations photo. My daughter-in-law barged into my room while I was still in my robe, a mauve flannel thing that I had stitched years ago. "Mom, could you change into something more presentable?" "Presentable? For the pictures. We're doing a family shoot before dinner. I got a photographer from Instagram. She does holiday spreads. Wear something fall-colored. Not too sad." I almost asked what too sad looked like, but instead I nodded. I went to the closet and pulled out my mustard cardigan, the one with the chipped button and faint tea stain at the sleeve. I had few choices left. She frowned. "Do you have anything tighter?" "No," I said simply. "Well, at least put on some blush. You look washed out." "Washed out?" She left before I could answer. I sat down, took out my compact mirror, and stared at my face for a long moment. My lips trembled, but I applied a light touch of lipstick, just enough to look alive. Downstairs the house had transformed. Orange garlands, gold-trimmed plates, a centerpiece of dried corn husks and plastic pumpkins. Everyone was dressed like a magazine ad, coordinated tones of rust and beige and cream. They had even dressed the baby in a tiny pilgrim outfit. When I stepped into the room, the photographer said, "Oh, perfect. Grandma's here. We're going to position her on the armchair." They placed me down like a prop, adjusted the shawl on my shoulder, tilted my chin. A flash went off. Then another. The baby cried. My grandson grumbled. My son pretended to check his phone. "Let's try again," the photographer said. Big smiles. 1, 2. I tried to smile, but my hip ached. The chair had no cushion. I leaned slightly to the left to avoid the pressure. My legs started to cramp, but I held the pose. Click. "There. Perfect," the photographer exclaimed. My daughter-in-law clapped. "This is the one we'll post." Then, without warning, she turned to me and said, "Okay, Mom, you can head back upstairs. We don't want you overdoing it. Dinner will be a while." I blinked. "I thought we were all eating together." "We are. Just later. You should rest. You look tired in the photos." I looked at my son. He nodded vaguely. "Yeah, Mom. Go lie down. We'll call you when we plate." But no one ever called me. I waited in my room for over an hour. I listened to the laughter, the music, the clatter of cutlery. I smelled turkey and gravy, stuffing and cranberry, the yeast of fresh rolls. At some point, footsteps approached. A knock. Then the door creaked open. My grandson appeared holding a styrofoam container. "Sorry," he said flatly. "We forgot." "Here." He placed it on my desk, then turned and left before I could open it. Inside was a cold portion of turkey, mashed potatoes clumped together like paste, and half a dinner roll. No gravy. No silverware. No pie. I ate with my fingers. I stared at the container long after it was empty. I folded it neatly, like it deserved better. When I opened Facebook later, the first thing I saw was my face, posted by my daughter-in-law. "So blessed to have Grandma with us this year, 4 generations strong." There I was, slumped in the chair, lips pressed together, like I had just bitten pain. My eyes were glassy, my hand gripping the armrest for balance, but the caption made it seem like I was glowing with joy. I scrolled down. Dozens of comments. "She looks so happy. Cherish every moment with her. They go too fast. Such a sweet old soul." I read every comment. I did not cry. I had done that already. Instead, I clicked Save Photo, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I would need it later. Later that night, I heard them in the kitchen. "She really does complete the aesthetic," my daughter-in-law said. "Gives it that generational depth." My son chuckled. "Yeah, nothing says tradition like a breathing relic." "She's useful in doses," she added, "kind of like a fireplace." Their laughter drifted upstairs like smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of the cardigan still on my shoulders. I had not even taken it off. I stared at the photo again, that moment where I was leaning to avoid the pain, frozen, misunderstood, rebranded as joy. They used me like garnish on a plate they never served me from. And in that silence, I realized they would never let me be more than a prop again. Not unless I forced them to see me as something else. Something real. I opened the drawer, pulled out my notebook, and I wrote one line in capital letters. A prop with a plan. I underlined it twice. Then I turned the page and wrote down everything they had said about me that week. Every phrase, every insult, every time they smiled with their teeth but not their eyes. Because props do not speak. But I do. The sound of laughter downstairs no longer pierced me. It became background noise, like the hum of a dying refrigerator or the ticking of an old clock. Familiar, steady, and completely ignorable. They thought I was retreating. That each quiet dinner alone, each blank stare into the yard, meant I was slipping further away. But I was not retreating. I was remembering. One Tuesday morning, after they left for a brunch I was not invited to, I walked into my closet and pulled the small stepladder from behind my coats. I slid aside the hanging clothes until my fingers found the notch in the back panel. Behind it, still wrapped in an old dish towel, was the key. The safe was small and steel gray. Hidden behind a false wall in the hallway linen closet, it had not been opened in years. The combination lock still responded to the old rhythm. Right 34, left 8, right 22, click. Inside, everything was exactly where I had left it. The deed to the house, bank statements in my name, the original will unsigned because I had hesitated years ago when they begged me to finalize things. They thought I had forgotten. I had not. I sat at my desk, spread the papers before me like a scholar reviewing source material. Years ago, I would have taught students to follow patterns, to read between the lines. Today, I applied those same instincts not to literature, but to the script of my life. I picked up the phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Whitman?" came the voice, slightly aged but unmistakable. "Clara," I said, "I need a favor, a legal one." Clara had been my student in the late 80s, bright, relentless. She was now a probate attorney in the city. We had exchanged Christmas cards for years. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said, like she had been waiting. We met in person the next day. I took the bus. No one noticed I was gone. I wore a scarf and sunglasses like a woman going to a funeral. In a way, I was. At her office, I laid everything out. She read in silence, only pausing to sip from a chipped mug labeled "Justice is Female." When she finished, she leaned back. "They've been siphoning money," she said calmly. "Subtle, but it's there." "I know. And the house?" "Still mine, never transferred." She nodded. "Do you want to sell it?" "During the week they're away," I said. "It'll be easier." She did not flinch. "And the new heir?" "I've chosen someone," I said. "Distant family, but she's been here for me. Reads to me, brings groceries without asking, never once made me feel like a burden." Clara opened a fresh folder. "Then let's get to work." Over the next week, we changed everything. We revoked the financial power of attorney that my son had guilted me into years ago. We updated my will. We rerouted all banking alerts to my personal email. We reset passwords. We notified my pension office. We registered a new durable medical power of attorney, one that named no one in this house. By the time Friday came, the house was under contract with a quiet buyer, a widow who wanted peace and did not mind the outdated kitchen. The closing date was set, 2 weeks from now, perfectly aligned with the day my family's cruise departed. Back at home, I cooked dinner like nothing had changed. I smiled when they passed the potatoes. I nodded when my daughter-in-law said, "You've been very well behaved lately." At night, I practiced writing my name in calm, steady strokes. It would need to match on multiple documents. I kept a bag under my bed, just one. Inside, my documents, a change of clothes, a small envelope of photos I refused to leave behind, and Ginger's blanket. My grandson once said I was a roach with a pension. Let him find out what roaches do when they've lived through wars, betrayals, and the erosion of self. We do not just survive, we adapt. And sometimes, we remove the floorboards under those who tried to step over us. They left in the dark, whispering so they would not wake me. I heard them anyway. Suitcases rolled down the hallway like soft thunder. Shoes tapped against the tile with hurried purpose. My daughter-in-law cursed under her breath when she spilled something, probably the vitamin packs she insisted everyone take for immunity. I stayed in bed, eyes closed, breath steady. "Did you pack the charger?" my son asked. "Yes." "His passport?" "In the front pocket." "And Mom's pills?" my grandson asked, then snorted. "Oh wait, she's not coming." Laughter followed. Then the front door clicked shut. Silence. I waited a full 5 minutes, then rose and walked to the window. Their SUV pulled out of the driveway, headlights bouncing off the lawn ornaments. I watched until they disappeared. Then I boiled water for tea. The mug I used had no words on it, just a chipped rim and a faint crack near the handle. It had belonged to my mother. She once said, "When they stop asking what you want for breakfast, start preparing your escape." I sipped in silence. At 8:07 a.m., my phone rang. It was Clara. "It's done," she said. "Title transferred, funds wired. The buyer's agent has keys. The house is no longer yours, legally speaking." I nodded, though she could not see me. "And the accounts?" "All accounts tied to your name but accessed by others. Frozen. Fraud department flagged them as potential identity theft. Your grandson's credit card was declined this morning at a smoothie stand." I let out a small sound, not quite a laugh. "A release." Clara continued. "The bank confirmed the full transfer. 3.4 million. It's safe in your new account. No one but you can touch it." "Thank you," I said softly. She paused. "Do you want to know where they are right now?" "No," I said. "I already know." At the port of Miami, chaos unfolded like a poorly directed play. They had arrived with coordinated luggage sets, printed itineraries, and entitlements stitched into every breath. My daughter-in-law wore a sun hat the size of a steering wheel. My grandson recorded everything on his phone. Content for the cruise vlog, he had told his friends. But the first hiccup came quickly. The check-in agent frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's a hold on your booking." "What kind of hold?" my son asked. "Financial. The payment method was declined, and it appears there's an alert on the primary traveler's ID." My daughter-in-law leaned forward. "Excuse me? Do you know who we are?" "No," the agent said flatly. "But the system does, and it says here this reservation is under investigation." The next 30 minutes were a blur of phone calls, escalating tones, and rising tempers. Security was summoned when my grandson began shouting. "I paid for this." "We paid. You paid with money that wasn't yours," the security officer said calmly. Then came the final blow. A federal officer arrived, badge clipped to his belt, and asked my daughter-in-law to step aside. He showed her something on a tablet. Her face drained of color. She pointed at her husband. "He told me to do it. It was his mother." The officer raised an eyebrow. "So you're admitting you used her name to open lines of credit?" "It wasn't like that," she screamed. "She gave us permission." "Did she?" the officer asked. "They tried calling me twice. I let it ring. The third time I answered. You," my daughter-in-law shrieked. "You did this." "I'm drinking Earl Grey," I said. "It's a bit early for yelling." "You bitch! You ruined everything!" "No, dear," I replied. "I ended what you started. You think you've won? You think you're smart. I think I'm free," I said simply. She screamed again, this time so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Then came the words I had waited for, not out of satisfaction, but out of confirmation. "That old bitch, she's the one who did this." A pause, then the officer's voice. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to calm down." I ended the call. Set the phone down, poured more tea. Outside, the wind moved the trees gently. Birds chirped like nothing had changed. But something had. Everything had. By evening, I was sitting in a quiet rental apartment a few miles away. Small, clean, mine. No echo of footsteps above me. No sounds of slamming drawers. No one telling me the Wi-Fi was not for old people. Just peace. I lit a candle and took out my notebook, the same one I had started months ago. I flipped to the last page, wrote one sentence. They left to conquer the ocean. I stayed to reclaim the shore. Then I closed the book. And for the first time in years, I slept with the door unlocked. They came home 3 days early. I imagine the ship felt too small after what happened at port. Or maybe they realized, without access to my money, their plans weren't sustainable. Perhaps the sting of being told no publicly for the first time in years was just too much to bear. But when they pulled into the driveway, it wasn't the driveway they remembered. The house had changed, the garden had been trimmed, the rusted patio chairs replaced, the front door was a different color, and the locks, they didn't fit their keys. They stood there, dumbfounded, bags in hand, sunburned from their failed vacation, ringing a doorbell that no longer answered to them. Eventually, a woman opened the door. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" she asked, polite but firm. My daughter-in-law blinked. "This is our house." "No," the woman said. This house was purchased 2 weeks ago. The deed is in my name. That's impossible. My mother-in-law lives here. This is her home. The woman looked confused for only a moment, then smiled gently. You must be her family. She left a note in case you came back. She stepped away and returned with an envelope. Inside, one sentence. I let you live in my house. You mistook it for yours. The woman shut the door. They tried to call me again. I didn't answer. They showed up at Clara's office the next day demanding explanations. Clara handed them a stack of documents. Everything was done legally, she said. Marie Whitman transferred all assets voluntarily and in full mental capacity. There is nothing for you here. They exploded. My daughter-in-law threatened to sue. My son demanded restitution. My grandson muttered, "This is elder abuse." Clara raised an eyebrow. "No," she said, "but what you did was..." She placed a copy of the restraining order on the table. "You are now legally barred from contacting or approaching Mrs. Whitman or her new residence. Any violation will be treated as harassment." "But she's our mother!" my son yelled. Clara didn't flinch. "Funny, you didn't treat her like one." It didn't stop there. The real unraveling took time, and it came piece by piece. First was my daughter-in-law. She had spent years curating an online persona, devoted mother, loving wife, doting daughter-in-law. She had millions of views on videos of her surprising grandma with flowers, knitting blankets for me, baking gluten-free pies because mom deserves love too. But the internet is a fickle beast. It started with one comment. "This seems fake. Why does grandma look scared?" And then came the video I uploaded anonymously, just a short clip. The audio from my hearing aid synced with a blurry shot from the kitchen cam. Her voice, clear as day. "If she dies before the cruise, can we get a refund?" And another, "She's like mold. You can't kill her, she just grows quieter." People noticed. People listened. The comments turned. Then the reposts began. Within a week, her sponsors pulled out. Within 2, her page was locked, then deleted. A BuzzFeed article titled "The Grandma Who Fought Back" featured my story. Well, part of it. Just enough to make people think. Just enough to make her sweat. Then came the investigation. Elder abuse, financial manipulation, theft. They subpoenaed my recordings, every cruel joke, every moment of mocking, every instance of neglect. There was enough. They froze her accounts. The IRS followed soon after. My grandson was next. He had reapplied to several Ivy League schools, hopeful after deferral. But someone, no one knew who, sent the admissions board a copy of the audio where he called me just a roach with a pension. It spread. The admissions office responded with a brief letter. "We regret to inform you that due to recent character revelations, your application has been declined. We seek students who value integrity and family." He posted about cancel culture on his private account. Someone leaked it. His internship offer disappeared 2 days later. Last I heard, he was working at a frozen yogurt shop, still blaming me. My son was hardest to trace. He kept quiet, kept his head down, but whispers followed him at work. His name was linked to the investigation. His colleagues found out he had tried to push his mother into signing over everything, then claimed it was her idea. His company offered early retirement. He took it, but he didn't leave with honor. He left with a cardboard box and a reputation. As for me, I never raised my voice. I never knocked on doors. I never asked for an apology. I didn't need to. Some victories do not come with cheers, they come with silence. And silence, when it is finally your own, is the loudest sound in the world. I do not need much anymore. My new apartment is modest, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a small writing nook that overlooks the lake. The water shifts with the wind like soft memory. Ducks visit the shoreline at dawn. Children fish nearby in the afternoon, and every evening I watch the sun lower itself into the lake like it, too, is tired but proud. There are no voices yelling up the stairs, no footsteps pacing above my room. No one knocks on my door unless I've invited them. Silence, for the first time in decades, is a friend. I still keep a routine. I wake up at 6, make tea, write 3 pages in my notebook, not for memory but for gratitude. I walk around the block twice before breakfast. I read the newspaper slowly, then prepare for my afternoon class. Yes, I teach again. Not at a university, not with chalkboards or grading rubrics, but to a small group of older women, widows, grandmothers, retirees, and caretakers who meet in the community center twice a week. The class is called Writing for Self-Defense. It started as a joke, honestly. I put the sign-up sheet on the bulletin board one day, out of boredom, thinking no one would come. But the first session had 6 women. The next had 12. Now we have a wait list. We sit in a circle, notebooks in hand, and we write. We write the things no one let us say. We write the moments we were dismissed, mocked, manipulated, erased. We write not to hurt, but to reclaim. One woman, Evelyn, wrote a poem to the adult son who never visits. Another, Marjorie, wrote a monologue in the voice of her cane, the only thing that never walks away, she said with a dry laugh. They are brilliant, they are survivors. And they remind me that silence is not the absence of voice. It is often where it hides, waiting. Sometimes I share pieces of my story, just enough to let them know I understand. They nod, knowingly. None of us are surprised by cruelty, but we are continually amazed by our own strength. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out my inbox, I found a letter waiting in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a card, floral, simple, clean. The handwriting was familiar. Dear Grandma, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for showing me that silence can be strength, not surrender. I started college last month. I joined the writing club. They asked what my biggest inspiration was. I said, my great aunt, who once taught literature and later taught me how to survive with dignity. I promise, no one will ever call you a roach again, not while I'm alive. With love, Kara. I read it twice, then again. Kara, my great-niece, the one who used to sneak books from my shelf when she thought no one was watching. The one who brought me arthritis cream without asking. The one who remembered I liked my tea without sugar. The one I left everything to, because she never asked for it. She only gave. I placed the letter on my desk and smiled. They took everything they could, my voice, my space, my dignity, until I took it back. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with memory, with truth, with ink. Later that evening, I made a fresh cup of tea and sat by the window. The sun dipped below the trees, casting long golden ribbons across the lake. I opened my old notebook, the one I started the day after Thanksgiving, when they called me a roach. The final page was still blank. I picked up my pen and wrote one line. They thought I had only survived, but no, I won. I closed the notebook. And finally, I exhaled. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening to my story, but for hearing it. Some people live hidden their entire lives, unseen in places called home, until one day they speak in a hush that shatters the world around them. I was never just surviving, I was waiting. And now I'm writing. If my story reminded you of someone you know, a quiet woman in the corner, a grandmother with trembling hands but steel in her spine, share this with her. She's not alone, and if you want to hear more true stories like this, from the women they tried to erase, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because revenge has no expiration date, and wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers.